Today I am recording a video lecture on poetry, especially for students of literature and for second year student as well, for first year and second year student as well. So I will discuss poetry from the book of second year as well as from first year. So today I will discuss All the World is a Stage, written by Shakespeare. But first of all, I am going to discuss about poetry. What is poetry? Before starting the text, I will first of all tell you what poetry is for the purpose to enhance your knowledge about poetry. So, what is poetry? Spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. What is poetry? Poetry is spontaneous. Spontaneous, that is sudden. So, spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, ताकतवर एहसासात, powerful feelings, which is uncontrolled. Powerful means such feelings which are uncontrolled. So powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. So first of all, we should focus on this definition. Then we will be able to understand poetry. What is poetry? So poetry is feelings. The most important word in this definition, that is feelings. What is poetry? Poetry is feelings. What is poetry? Poetry is feelings. Poetry is feelings, Feelings are from sensory organs. We have five senses. We can see, we can touch, we can taste, we can hear, we can smell. So we have these five senses. These five senses will give you sensation. When these sensation became intense, it will be converted into feelings. So what is poetry? Poetry is feelings. What type of feelings it will be? It will be sudden feelings. Feelings will be spontaneous. So number two, that is sudden, spontaneous, unplanned. So what is poetry? Poetry is sudden feelings. Poetry is sudden feelings. What type of sudden feelings will be? Those sudden feelings will be powerful. That will be powerful. So what is poetry? Poetry is sudden and powerful feelings. Or we can say poetry is sudden and uncontrolled feelings. Sudden and uncontrolled feelings. What is poetry? Poetry is sudden and uncontrolled feelings. Powerful feelings. These sudden and uncontrolled feelings will overflow. So overflow is fourth important word within this definition. What is poetry? Poetry is sudden, powerful feelings which will overflow. And this overflow will be recollected. This will be recollected. And how it will be recollected? That will be recollected in tranquility. So we have six important words within this definition. If you are able to know about these six words, you will be able to know about poetry. So what is poetry? Poetry is sudden, powerful feelings which will overflow. This overflow will recollect and tranquility. Tranquility, silence. For example, your feelings, those will be sudden and powerful. So they will become intense. So they will start to overflow. This overflow will be recollected and will be recollected in silence. सो पोइट्री शायरी उन ताकतवर जज्बात का और गैर मंसूबा बंदी वाले जज्बात का मजमुआ है, उसका वो बहाव है जिसको हम खामोशी के साथ पेन और पेपर के साथ उस ओवरफ्लो को रिकॉर्ड करें, recollect करें, that we will call poetry. That we will call poetry. So what is poetry? Poetry is sudden and powerful feelings recollected and tranquility which will overflow, and this overflow will be recollected and tranquility. This we will call poetry. This we will call poetry. So spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected and tranquility, that is called poetry. That is called poetry. Poetry contains two kinds. One is called classical poetry and another is called romantic poetry. So first I will define what is classical poetry. Walter Pater says, I have no brain above my eyes. I depict what I see. I have no brain above my eyes. I depict what I see. Meaning which, I have my brain within my eyes. When I see something, I will start it to write about it. मेरे आंखों से ऊपर दिमाग नहीं, जो कुछ देख लेता हूं उसी को लिख लेता हूं. It means that he will write about worldly things. So classical poet will write about worldly things which we can see, which will be according to our sensation and according to our observation. So classical poet will write something about worldly thing which will be according to our day-to-day observation. Day-to-day observation. So classical poet will write about worldly thing. It means that he will not write about imagination, because imagination you can't see, and worldly thing which will be according to our observation. Walter Pater says, I have no brain above my eyes. I depict what I see. Dr. Johnson says, I am holding mirror to the universe. I am holding mirror to the universe. I depict what I see. मैंने कायनात के सामने शीशा पकड़ा हुआ है, जो चीज शीशे में नजर आ जाए उसी को लिख लेता हूं. So I am holding mirror to the universe. I depict what I see. So these are very two important quotations. So I have told you three type of definition of poetry. First definition is spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. Second definition is I have no brain above my eyes. I depict what I see. And third definition is I am holding mirror to the universe. I depict what I see. So these two definition tells us about classical poetry. This definition first definition tells us about romantic poetry. So if a writer is writing about worldly things, if a writer is writing about observation, those observation will be according to his senses. So a poet will write something according to the diction within poetic language. So diction, selection of words. So while he is selecting words, it means that he will use difficult vocabulary. So classical write will use difficult vocabulary and he will bother about poetic language as well. So there will be figure of speech. There will be figures of speech. So he will use poetic language because poetic language is not an ordinary language. We are using flowery language and we are using figure of speeches as well. I will record a video lecture on figure of speech as well. But today my focus is about classical and romantic poetry. So poetic language will be used within classical poetry. Diction will be there within classical poetry and difficult vocabulary will be there within classical poetry. And classical poetry will be according to the worldly affairs. Then I am coming towards romantic poetry. Romantic poetry, romantic poetry, both in poetry, there will be the major thing will be beauty. Because beauty is the major tool for poetry. And poetry, beauty, why beauty? Because a man contains aesthetic consideration. Poetry is the product of aesthetic consideration. Aesthetic consideration, Zawke Jamaliyat. that everything which I like, everything which I use, everything which I want to see, that will be beautiful. That is aesthetic consideration. So classical poet as well contains aesthetic consideration as well as romantic poetry. But in romantic poetry, there will be deviation from the word of reality. When a poet is deviating from the word of reality, it means that he is shifting towards the word of imagination. He will shift towards imagination. He will shift towards imagination. I will giving you an example from the from romantic poetry, but let me explain. So, what type of language he will use? What type of language the romantic poet will use? First characteristic, romantic poet will deviate from the word of reality. Romantic poet will shift towards imagination. Romantic poet will give strangeness to beauty. These are three major characteristics of romantic poetry. What type of language it will be? Wordsworth says, poet is a man among men, speaking to men in the language of man. Be in mind. What Wordsworth says about romantic poetry? Poet is a man, speaking to men, and poet is a man among men, speaking to men in the language of men. So, if a poet is using the language of men, it will be just a simple one. He will use figure of speech as well, but in a very simple manner. Because romantic poet will write something in simple language. Actually, he has contained keen sensibilities. When a romantic poet started to write poetry, he is not in senses. Wordsworth says, he will be in the state of ecstasy. His mind will be in the state of ecstasy. Deeper and deeper the emotions, and the emotions will be deeper and deeper, and then it will convert it into strong emotions, and those strong emotions will give him ecstatic feelings. And when a poet is in ecstasy, he will be uncontrolled. He has no control on himself. So he is writing poetry in an ecstatic manner. So he is not in his senses while he is writing poetry. So he is not thinking about difficult vocabulary during writing poetry, a diction during writing poetry, and a figure of speech as well. So those figure of speech will be spontaneous. Now I will giving you example how a romantic poet is deviate from the word of reality. Just be attentive. John Keats says, my heart aches and a drowsy numbness pain. So first of all, lamentation is there. My heart aches and a drowsy numbness pain. My senses are thou, of hemlock I had drunk. Oh, for a draught of vintage that had been cooled in a long age, deep delved earth, tasting of flora in the country green, dance and provincial song and sunburnt mirth. Oh, for a beaker full of warm south, full of true, the blushful hypocrite, with beaded bubbles winking at the brim, that I may drink and leave the word unseen. Here just heed towards deviation from the word of reality. That I may drink and leave the word unseen, and with thee fade away into the forest dim. Fade far away, dissolve and quite forget the weariness, the fever and the fret, where palsy shakes a few sad lost grey hair, where youth grows pale and spectre thin and dies, where men sit and hear each other groan, where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes, our new love pine at them beyond tomorrow. Our new love pine at them beyond tomorrow. Forlorn the very word is like a bell, to tell me beg from thee to my soul self. So first of all, that I may drink and leave the word unseen. That I may drink and leave the word unseen, and with thee fade away into the forest dim, not charioted by the Bacchus and his power, but through the waveless wings of poesy. So that is deviation from the word of reality. So he has deviated from the word of reality, and then he is coming back towards the word of reality. And he says, forlorn the very word is like a bell, to tell me beg from thee to my soul self. To tell me beg from thee to my soul self. जिसने मेरे रूह को मेरे जिस्म के अंदर दोबारा लाकर खड़ा कर दिया. So that is deviation from the word of reality towards the word of imagination. Towards the word of imagination. So these are two basic kinds of poetry. One is called classical poetry, another is called romantic poetry. Classical poetry will be about worldly things which will be under observation, which will be according to our sensation. Language will be difficult. There will be poetic language. There will be diction, and vocabulary will be tough, and there will be figure of speech as well. A lot of figure of speech he will use. But in romantic poetry, there will be simple language. There will be very less vocabulary, and there will be very less use of figure of speech as well, figurative language. Because Wordsworth says that poet is a man among men, speaking to men in the language of men. Speaking to men in the language of men. So, what is poetry? Spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, recollected and tranquility. Poetry is feelings. Feelings must be sudden. Those sudden feelings must be powerful, and those powerful feelings must overflow, and this overflow will be recollected and tranquility. So that we will call poetry. That we will call poetry. So be in mind all those things and try your best to learn about this quotation as well. And within next lecture, I will start the poem All the World is a Stage, written by William Shakespeare. Thank you very much.